Good evening. It's Tuesday, the 7th of October. I'm here with Beyond the Mainstream with my co-host Richie Brown on Unprecedented TV. It's been said by our great Lord and Master, Lembit Opik, who actually is the co-founder of Unprecedented TV, that I talk way too much during these shows and Paul Richie doesn't get a word in. So we're going to start the first half of the show with Richie doing most of the talking. It's going to be really hard for me to actually not interrupt because I'm a serial interrupter. But hopefully he can ask the questions to start with anyway, because he has to pop off at 2:30. This is the thing these days. We've all got so many hats to wear and so many jobs to do. It's like you don't know what you're doing from one moment to the other. And we'll talk to Gareth about that in a minute. So yeah, here is Gareth Icke. He is the great man of many talents. He's an explorer, he's a writer, published author, presenter of many shows, activist, husband, father, and so much more. Mr. Gareth Icke, welcome.
How are you? I've whilst you were talking, then I managed to knock a load of supplements on the floor, so that's fine.
Didn't hear a thing. That's very good. That's the way it goes. So Richie's got some like really highbrow questions to ask, and then I'll get down to the banter and the nitty gritty.
I'm not sure they're that highbrow, but there we go.
They're more highbrow than mine, anyway. So yeah, take it away, Richie.
Absolutely. So your speech in 2020 was wonderful. I was just rewatching that for preparation for this interview. It's interesting to note that back then you were even saying that they were accusing like us of being granny killers for avoiding the 2020 restrictions and that kind of thing. I don't know if we've got that video. I think it's worth a watch.
Yeah, we can watch it now if you like, yeah. If Basil's paying attention. Okay, well, maybe we'll play it later towards the end because he's obviously wandered off. I did say to him, we'll play it when we mention it.
I just want to say it's an honour and a privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with every single one of you. It takes courage to stand up at the best of times, and it really takes courage to stand up now, so thank you for doing that. It takes courage here because we know exactly how we're going to be portrayed by the mainstream media as far-right lunatics and conspiracy theorists, nutcases, grandma killers. The mainstream media is never, ever, ever going to be on our side because they are owned and controlled by the very people we're fighting against. We're never going to get their acceptance, and we should stop seeking it because we're well beyond that now. We're in a psychological war, and we are the front line. All those people that are home getting their entire narrative from the BBC are never going to come and fight for us, but that doesn't mean that we don't fight for them. I've got nothing but love for every single one of you, for every single police officer, for every single counter-protester, for every single person sat at home watching us and shaking their head. Because hate and division is what's got us in this mess, and love and unity is what is going to get us out of it. The psychological war is dangling the carrot in front of us. If you do this, you can get your life back. If you do X, Y, and Z, you can get your life back. Newsflash. Governments do not take away freedoms and impose draconian impositions just to reverse it. In the same way a robber doesn't turn up the following morning going, oh mate, sorry, here's your Xbox. It's not going to happen. But we take it back, and taking it back is a lot easier than people think. It's simply by non-compliance. We are the 99.99%, and when we stand together, it's over. It was just a 3-week lockdown to flatten the curve. And when the curve was flatter than Building 7, it was extended and expanded, because it was never about health, it was about control. The once great NHS was destroyed and rebranded as the COVID Health Service, nothing more than a propaganda arm of government. And while hospitals sat empty, cancer went undiagnosed, heart disease untreated, suicide spiked 200%, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, domestic violence, all through the roof. 25% of young Americans have said they contemplated taking their own life, and while all this was happening, we were told we could come out of our cages at 8 p.m. on a Thursday to applaud this destruction. Even while we lost our jobs and our livelihoods and our abilities to feed our families, because it was never about health, it was about control. There's nothing normal about over 60s in care homes having do not resuscitate orders put on them without theirs or their family's consent, having their treatment withdrawn so they can die alone and have COVID-19 put on their death certificate when there's no evidence for it. There's nothing social about being distant. There's nothing normal about kids dying alone in hospital beds because their mums and dads are not allowed to be there with them. There's nothing normal about that, and I will not accept it. We are the 99.99%. We decide our futures, not them.
Excellent, very impressive.
it's
You're
weird
ahead of the
listening to
curve
that
on a lot
back.
of it.
It's like an edited version. I rambled on quite a lot longer than that. I think it was about 10 minutes or something.
And didn't you do a bit of a rap at one point?
Yeah, that's embarrassing though. I don't know what
No,
that
it
was all
wasn't. It
about.
was great. Your wife loved it.
I remember speaking to my wife as I was driving back from London, and it was like, she's like, I've just seen the video. You did a rap at the end. Like, what? I was like, I don't know. Yeah,
it was great. It was great.
It was a crazy time though, wasn't it? It was a crazy time, and it feels like we're kind of back there again, in many ways.
Was that the September the 26th one?
Yeah. So that was 2020. That was right at the beginning. You know, it was strange that so many of us at that point had seen through everything straight away. You know, in our minds, I guess it was bloody obvious, wasn't it? But for so many people, you know, they probably went on another 18 months of this craziness. You know, it was
Longer.
mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some still today, to be fair.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Some people are only just waking up now, aren't they? I was actually standing right behind you with your dad at that protest. Yeah. It's it
was funny because, you know, it was so many people, wasn't it? And like, I thought I'd be, you know, really nervous and stuff before. And like the night before, I stayed at my mate's house down in Surrey, and I was kind of like having a couple of beers thinking, yeah, I've got to do this thing tomorrow. But the minute you stood on stage, it just kind of, that whole thing just shifted. And it was like, no, it's bigger than, you know, being embarrassed or bigger than being nervous. It doesn't matter, because it's, you know, even if you flop and have an absolute mare, it doesn't really matter, because what we're fighting is far bigger than looking like a prat. So
you have to overcome all that nervousness. And
totally. And, you know, I think that's something that a lot of people have said to me in terms of, you know, because we've spoke so many times, to be fair, Jacqui, and because you know my family, the first question I ever get asked in any interview ever is always, what was it like growing up as, you know?
That's what I said to Richie. We're not going to ask that question.
But the thing is, it's quite a difficult one to answer, because I don't know any different.
Yeah.
So I don't know what my, normally if you can compare it to something, can't you?
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you determine what something's like, by comparing it to other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've only ever done this once, or at least that I can remember. So I don't know. But I think now, you know, in terms of saying what you believe to be right and letting the chips fall where they may, I think that all came as a result of that childhood, you know, because
and also because your dad was like a man on a mission. Do you think it's made you a man on a mission as well?
Yeah, well, partly, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that was basic training, that period of time of life anyway, that sort of prepares you anyway. But the other thing is, like, you know, we were talking about it in Birmingham the other night, like, I can kind of, I probably in my life have probably taken a little bit too much shite, actually, because I've tried to appease and be slightly more affable and friendly, and less so now, but you know, over the years, and you know, even in the early COVID days, you know, I didn't go along with anything, but I had a bit of sympathy for people, you know, and I kind of sort of let people get away with stuff a bit, because I felt for them more than anything else. And then, you know, once they started coming for the kids, particularly your own kids, but coming for the kids in terms of jabbing the kids and masking the kids and affecting their mental health, locking them down, and everything else that's gone since, you know, this war on children, basically. Then I think, that's probably maybe turned me slightly more nasty at times, because it's like, you know, I'll bite you if you go for the kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, but
did you fall out with many people during that period?
That's a good question, actually. It was a weird one, mate, because you know, being an Icke, you'd sort of lost the normies a long time ago anyway, like long before Rona. You know, 9/11 had done a few, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely.
But also, I think it was quite strange in who bought into it and who didn't. So my kind of sphere of, I guess, sort of different friendship groups was like, you'd have your football mates that you didn't speak about political stuff to, because they'd just be like, Ike's off on one again. And then you'd have, you know, your more music friends and your anti-war mates that would be sort of more open to stuff, and you talk to them and you go on marches, you know, Palestinian marches in London and stuff like that, and you know, anti-Iraq war marches and this kind of thing. And so when the whole COVID thing started, I remember, like, you know, just turning around, like metaphorically turning around, thinking, right, here we go. We're in. And all the anti-war lot had bought it. They bought it hook, line and sinker. and all the, you know, punk rock anti-establishment types that I thought were anti-establishment types had all bought it hook, line and sinker. And it was actually the football lot and the friends I'd made through personal training, you know, people that were more, I guess you consider perhaps not as kind of sharp politically, not as, you know, not necessarily interested in current affairs, more, you know, whatever. I mean, footballers have the perception of them is that they're just freaking idiots, isn't it, really? But they didn't buy it. They didn't buy it. And so actually it shifted. And actually a lot of those old musician mates that I had, mate, yeah, they thought I was, you know, stringing up granny by a neck.
The whole definition of intelligence changed over that period, I think. You know, before, if you went to university and had a degree, you know, you were intelligent. But over those first couple of years of the so-called COVID scamdemic, we started to realize that that's not intelligent at all, because most of those people are the ones that totally fell for it. And it was the men on the street, you know, the more, shall we say, like working class people, I suppose, that didn't go to university, who weren't having it. And
exactly, you know, I think in Britain you get independent opinion from the working class and aristocrats that don't give a shit, and then you got the middle class, which they have such fragile. They're so fragile in terms of their careers, and they don't want to upset like manners at the dinner table, and that they, I don't know, they fall for a very specific type of propaganda, and unfortunately that targeted them 100%.
Well, it boils down to the BBC, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think that trauma plays a part as well, you know. Like I remember hearing, you know, or reading, this conversation between these psychiatrists on psychologists, online around the COVID era, and people, they were taking questions basically, and it wasn't about COVID, it was just about stuff in general.
Yeah.
But there was a few people, like, you know, a handful of people that all sort of asked the same question, slightly different wording, but basically asked, why is it some people saw through the Rona stuff after 10 minutes and people are still not seeing it after 18 months? Like, how does that work? And they were saying that actually, you know, there is evidence. It's not definitive because there's not been enough study, but there is evidence to suggest that people that have been through a form of trauma, you know, whether it be, you know, sexual assault or you know, physical trauma, injury, a physical assault, you know, whatever, or just emotional, you know, stuff, baggage, that they're more likely to see through stuff than those that have maybe had a slightly more privileged, sheltered life. And then when I sort of looked at the people around me that were hook, line and sinker bought in on it to the point where they were aggressive towards people like myself and yourselves that weren't, they ticked that box. Yeah, they were, you know, had a pretty decent life, very little things to complain about, very little. I mean, I think we all face challenges in life. It's just some of us face them at different times. You know, people can have a cushy life until they're 50 and then the whole life falls apart. Others come out the womb and get a punch in the face. You know, so it's like, you know, people have different, you know,
that's
roads
interesting,
to the
actually,
middle, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't see that, but I'd worked out a couple of years ago that I'd noticed that the most intelligent people, the people who could see through the lies, I just put it down to people who had a tough time when they were younger, which is pretty much what you're saying.
Damaged goods, basically. That's
all of us, obviously. Obviously, Richie's okay because you didn't quite get it immediately, did you?
No.
Posh kid. Posh kid.
I thought originally that it had been, because I've been following some of the stuff coming out, and now obviously it's just clear psyops. But I'd been following that, thinking it was a virus that had come out of China, and I thought America had released a virus during the Olympics and all that. And then after a while, I was looking around and I was like, this is just complete nonsense.
Yeah, that whole releasing an artificial virus thing. I mean, as soon as I had that mention, I thought, well, if that's the case, it's not working very well, is it? Because no one seems to be ill. Shouldn't we all be dead if it's like a proper killer virus, you know? So that I gave up on that one immediately. My thinking is, I think Gareth's might be the same, that it was just a rebranded flu, which isn't even a thing. Flu is just a detox, you know. So if you read up on terrain theory, what are your views on germ theory hoax versus the she said totally biased terrain theory, Gareth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to everything in that thing. I mean the fact that after 270 years, germ theory is still called germ theory, that in itself is a clue that it's not a definitive proof. You know, so I'm open to it, absolutely, and I think, you know, that there was a hell of a lot of rebranding going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there is an element, I think, perhaps to the radiation pneumosis stuff, and that kind of big increase in this whole 5G stuff, and that maybe some people felt symptoms of that. I think there's probably a few different things going on, but I think the Wuhan lab thing was quite convenient in the sense that people that have a kind of a conspiratorial questioning mind would question the wet market story, because the wet market story it sounded shite from the beginning. Yeah. So you give them another version of events, and then they go, oh yeah, there we go, it's definitely the Wuhan lab, and a lot of people still go along that. Yeah. But the thing with that is that even if it is a Wuhan lab or it's a wet market, nothing changes in terms of the fact that you still got your excuse for a lockdown, you still got your excuse for your mask mandate, you still got an excuse for your mass jab rollout. So actually, on the face of it, nothing really changes. And in fact,
sorry, carry on.
If you want war with China, which is what I think they want in the end, then what better way to get particularly the American public on board than to say, look at this country, they released a bioweapon that killed a shed load of people, and I'm seeing now that Republican Congresswoman, what's her name, Luna Paulino or whatever, she's a bit of an Israel firster, which they all are, aren't they, to be fair, but she's now saying they've got evidence that China was involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And you're like, China is that the foreign government? I'm not sure it is, love, but you can just see people now starting to point towards China. So I wonder if that whole Wuhan lab thing might just come back, as a story, as a major talking point.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, Richie, sorry, I'm not interrupting. Go on.
Because Lyme disease was a US weapon that was released, and that's pretty much been confirmed. They've had numerous kind of state depositions about Lyme disease, and how they were modifying ticks to spread it, and they accidentally released it in the countryside. Well, I mean, the quotes over the accident, I think.
Well, that's it. And there's a lot of evidence as well for the Spanish flu being connected to the mass, jab rollout after the war and all that, and returning soldiers and stuff. Like there's so much more to know about so many things.
The Spanish flu seemed to only affect kind of men from 25 to 50. It didn't affect any really other demographic, and those were all the men that had, stormed through trenches that were covered in chemical warfare.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's something to it, isn't there? That's the thing. It's I think it was clever in naming it the Spanish flu as well, because as I understand it, I think it came out of Kansas, didn't it, or something like that? Yeah. Nowhere near Spain, but call it Spanish flu, and that's the thing. You read that in a history textbook, and you assume it came out of Madrid or something. It's not how it worked.
There's also a lot to be said for the psychological aspect. If you believe you're going to get ill, if you're told every day by the telly, by the men in the shiny suits on the telly, you're going to get ill, there's this killer virus, you might get it, you probably will get it, you might die. After a while, that can make you ill, just that belief, I mean, there's a lot to be said for the power of the mind. So I think a lot of people would get their general detoxing, their colds, their flus, and just think, oh my God, I've got the COVID. Of course, did the useless, not fit for purpose test. And then once it was confirmed that they had the killer virus, off they went, and got really ill. There's a lot to be said.
Well, there's evidence. They've shown that in studies of how they've proved by making someone believe that they've had their food or drink poisoned, they suddenly start to feel ill and short of breath and things like that. Because, like you say, it's in your head. And this is the thing when people would say to me at the time, "Yeah, but I was ill." I was like, "Yeah, have you never been ill before? Then is that the first time you've ever been ill? You've managed 45 years without being ill. That's amazing." They're like, "No, it was different." And why was it different? Well, and there isn't anything. No. It's kind of like, I felt all bunged up and I couldn't really smell proproperly. Oh, well, you had a cold then? Just like you have probably every year for the last 20 years.
I didn't particularly notice it.
Yeah, we don't notice it because you weren't told it was going to kill you. And it's like you're absolutely right, Jacqui. If you start feeling ropey, and I've had it, right, because I go down these lead mines like a prat sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
And I went down this Winston mine, under deep underground under the North York moors, right? And we were stomping for a good 1.5 kilometers underground, and it started to smell funny. Now we have these readers on us, and if there's a toxic gas of any description, they go off before it even begins to get anywhere dangerous, and you just get the hell out of Dodge. Now we had 4 of these, I think, because it was 4 of us. Yes, so 4 of us. None of them were going off, but it started to smell a bit funky. Well, it probably smelled funky because you, however far underground, and you probably not had someone be down there for years. Probably.
Yeah.
But it got in my head, and I started feeling a bit short of breath. And I turned to my mate Phil, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm starting to struggle." The other 2 were fine, but I was going. There was nothing there, mate. There was no toxic gas at all, but it got in my head, and I did start to feel breathless, and I was starting to feel a bit tight-chested. You know, the mind is a powerful thing if you start to believe something. Absolutely.
The mind, body, and soul are connected, and people forget that. You know, it's all one thing. You know, so yeah, your thoughts can manifest illness. Definitely, like you said, it's been proven.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you been following the Project Pegasus at the minute? That's that UK pandemic exercise that's going on. And we also had John Hopkins University in their spring magazine. They released the main title of their spring magazine was "Are We Ready for the Next Pandemic?" And I'm not sure if you're aware, but John Hopkins is like the military psychological warfare center that hosted Event 201, Dark Winter, Atlantic Storm, Clade X, and that sort of thing.
Well, they were also the worldwide, not even America, but the worldwide count, weren't they? A death count for COVID. That was all done through John Hopkins. No, I've not been following it. Obviously, I know it's going on, you know, and I'm just kind of like, to be honest, it just annoys me. But the idea of them trying it again, I think is pretty obvious that that's going to happen. I think, you know, I remember Bill Gates, Kermit the Frog smirk with his that we'll get attention next time. And then, you know, the sheer bloody, you know, fight and desire to get through this WHO pandemic treaty and all the amendments that they were making to the current legislation and stuff, they weren't doing that for no reason. You know, why would you bother unless you were gonna try and do it again? So I think they will, but you know, I think they'll probably just try and do. You know, I don't think they'll try and go as big. I think they'll probably maybe focus it on one nation. And so then you'll have, like, you've got this kind of, like my dad says about this blitzkrieg thing, where maybe you'll have a cyber attack might happen in one place. Then you've got this massive epidemic just kicks off somewhere else. There's a war between Israel and Iran. Russia, Ukraine are still going at it. China and Taiwan, you know. So actually you look around and it's like, Jesus, everything's going insane, like all at the same time. So then there's suddenly this state of national emergency just kind of issued everywhere for different reasons, that they can then use to push through emergency legislation like they did with the Coronavirus Act, and like they probably will try and do, I think, with the digital ID. Because I don't think even they're brazen enough to believe that they can get digital ID through the legitimate way, you know, where it will go in and it will have a reading, and then it'll have a second, a third reading, and then it'll go through the House of Lords and all this kind of stuff. Because there's so much opposition to it, I don't think they can do that. But if you can have a massive state of emergency that you can basically just steamroller it through, I think that's what they'll try and do.
Yeah, interesting. I'd wondered if they'd stuck it on as a kind of like a dead cat for Keir Starmer's complete unpopularity and his failings in the eyes of the British people, as a kind of pressure valve to relieve it. But yeah, that makes sense if they're going to just whip in a state of emergency and then push it through.
Yeah, I mean, he could be it could be his poll tax moment. Like, that's true. But I think with him, I think they will destroy him in the end. I think they'll get rid of him in the end, because I think they want a reform government. I think they want, you know, I think the fact that you've got Richard Tice licking the wall in Jerusalem now, you know, I mean, you know, they're building themselves up. I think if there was an election today, they'd be the next government, wouldn't they? If we're honest. And I don't think they've been very strong in their opposition for digital ID. I know that their MP for Runcorn was live on LBC saying, I don't see that there's a problem with digital ID, like just open like that. So I don't think that they are as opposed to it as their supporters would probably like to believe. And also, I think that if they get in, they can bring in digital ID on a kind of, look, we don't want to, you know, we don't want to. But, you know, you trust us, don't you? Because we're not like the other two parties. We're an outsider. You trust us, don't you? So we'll do it, but we'll do it in a way that still preserves your freedom. And people, unbelievably, people will go, yeah, so I wouldn't trust Keir Starmer to bring it in, because I think he'd use it to bring in more draconian measures. But I don't think Nigel Farage will. I think he's one of us. Yeah. Even though he's a you know, from the city and a friend of Peter Thiel, they'll ignore that stuff. So I think that they probably will try and bring down Labour and hope that reform can bring it in, because they'll kind of, pretend to be an outsider, which is exactly what they did with Trump in 2016. It's basically the same play.
Yeah, it's left to right, isn't it? The left will ram through horrible labor laws, like dismantle trade unions and that kind of thing, because they think they've got trust among the public on that side, and then the right will come in and do this. So it's just left to right.
Yeah, but you just stomp in all the way down the road together,
Yeah.
And I think what's happened is, certainly in America, people realized that it was a uni party, Republican, Democrat, uni party, two cheeks the same backside. So that's why I think they threw Trump in there to he's no, he's different. Oh yes, thank goodness for that. And so suddenly people like Alex Jones, that were all about the uni party, now suddenly, believe that everything is the Democrats' fault and Trump can sort everything out. And I think that they're trying to do the same play here, to be honest, in the United Kingdom with reform. But I think in terms of destroying Starmer, I think what they'll do is that they might bring that Ukrainian arsonist thing out the locker.
Really? Do you think if they do manage to pull off another scamdemic, although a lot more people are awake to what's going on, ready to dismiss it, I think there's a large proportion of people who actually really enjoyed it last time. I've said this consistently, that they loved the drama. They loved just the change, it's a bit less boring than normal. They loved the being furloughed, getting paid for not doing any work, sitting in the garden, Do you think it'll still be like that when it happens? Not if it happens again, but when it happens again. Or do you think those people might have changed their view now?
Well, there'll be a few. There'll be a few of the COVID marshal types that got a little bit of perceived power they've never had before in their life, like the school prefect types. But I think, to be honest, if you want to make a pandemic, and you want to make a real pandemic that can, terrify people into submission, let's have it right. You've just injected half the planet with God knows what.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, without sounding like I don't want to sound like a fear-mongering so-and-so, but you have just injected a large portion of the world's population with something. If further down the line you want a pandemic, can you essentially create one that actually is real? And so in the sense that people are dying. And so suddenly you'll have those people that saw through COVID last time, and the people that maybe didn't see through it last time, but then did in the end, going, oh no, it's bollocks, it's COVID all over again, it's just nonsense. And then suddenly, their auntie drops, and then the friends from school drop. Suddenly the neighbor drops, and it's like, oh no, hang on, this ain't the same. Like people are actually dying. Oh, okay, yes. In this case, we'll go along with all your draconian stuff because actually this is legit.
Yeah.
That wouldn't shock me.
Vaccines have had like DNA, massive amounts of DNA contamination. They even had the SV40, which is the cancer-inducing chemical, put back into the vaccine. And that was originally in the polio vaccines, like in the 1960s. So how did that make a re-emergence 60 years later in apparently a new novel vaccine?
It's twisted,
absolutely insane. I was hoping to get into a bit more of Unseen, but I'll leave my co-host Jacqui to do that. And I'll drop off now, but lovely to chat to you, Gareth.
And you, mate. I'll speak again, I hope.
I'm still here, so don't go anywhere. Bye, Richie. There was an article in the Mail this week, just staying on the subject of the jabs, saying that pharmacists are getting abused at work by customers coming in, demanding the jabs, the COVID jabs, but they're not eligible for them. And I just thought that is the most made-up story I've ever heard. So I contacted my very awake... I contacted my very awake pharmacist friend, and she said, you would not believe it. That's actually true. So they're coming in screaming abuse at me, she said, because I'm saying you're not eligible for the jab. She doesn't give the jabs anyway, but I don't want to say any more than that because she doesn't want to be identified at this stage in her career. But she said that a lot of pharmacists are getting abused. They're saying, if you don't give me that jab and I die, it's your fault, and all this sort of stuff. And some are refusing to leave the pharmacy, just standing there going, I'm not going until you give it to me. They've gone crazy.
Turkey's voting for Christmas, mate.
That's exactly what she said. That's exactly.
You can't save everyone. You can't. Yeah. It's actually a really quite a horrible realization to have, actually.
Yeah,
when you're when you're running around, like, to be fair, most of us were in the early days of Rona, running around trying to wake people up, people that we knew and loved and cared about. For goodness sake, see the light. Please don't get it. Come on, mate. Come on. Just wait and see if there's more data. Like, just even like playing that game a little bit with them. Don't get it just to go to freaking Crete, for crying out loud. Like, you can holiday in Britain. We had all these conversations with people, and in the end, you get to a point where you go, look, we live and die by the decisions we make. And if you've tried your hardest and you've explained all the facts to someone and they're still banging on the pharmacist's door begging for it, then, well, okay, all the best. I'm sorry. That ship sailed, man.
Yeah. Did you experience that horrible feeling where you had friends that were on side, or you believed they were on side, and they listened to you intently and nodded and agreed with everything you said, and then suddenly you found out they went and got the jabs? That feeling. So it was such a weird feeling, not one I'd had before. It's like you felt not conned necessarily, but just like, were they just pretending all that time, nodding and agreeing with me? Were they just like pretending to agree with me and secretly thinking, oh, she's mental, and then you go and get the jabs anyway? And that was a really horrible feeling. I didn't enjoy that much at all.
No, I had that for people wanting to go on holiday. That was it. That and to be fair to a man, they regret it and have vocalized their regret and have never done not even one booster, let alone God knows what number they're on now. I have no idea.
Yeah, I had a friend who did it for travel, and he ended up with a massive one of those calamari clots, 1 foot long, nearly had a heart attack and ended up in hospital. And they pulled out this thing that he showed me a photo of, and it was literally 12 inches long and just disgusting.
Jeez.
Blocking. I mean, we've got John O'Leary on next week, and he talks eloquently about all that stuff that he's found as his job as a funeral home director. Pretty horrendous, but I mean, it's still going on. People are still dying, in the time scale that the experts that we know predicted. There's more and more ambulances every day. Do you believe that those jabs were part of the depopulation agenda?
I think they were probably part of it. I think there was some of that going on. I think there's more to it as well. I think I think with the graphene oxide and other stuff that's in there's something else at play. Which could be, like we were talking about a few moments ago about the, pulling another play and actually being able to actually have a number of dead people to make the people believe that it's real. But also, with graphene oxide and what that can do in terms of its connectivity into the cloud and into, all these satellites that are being put up, tens of thousands of low orbit satellites. There's loads of different things that could be going on, and I actually think there's probably multiple things going on at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, they're coming out from all angles, and the fact they've put restrictions on the jabs now, it's only the most vulnerable people can get it. So the over 75s, pregnant women, they're encouraged to get it. And if Richie was here, he would tell you that his wife she's pregnant at the moment. She's been getting letters saying you've got to come for the RSV jab and this and that. And it's like, no way they're going to do that, because it causes miscarriages. Miscarriages went up by something ridiculous, like 400% after the jabs were doled out. So, and then, and I think the disabled are eligible for it. So it's basically the most vulnerable members of our society are allowed to have it. And to me, that just shrieks depopulate. They're trying to get rid of the babies before they're born. They're trying to get rid of the elderly when they're deemed not to serve any purpose in society. And of course, the disabled, that's eugenics. They're getting rid of the most vulnerable or possibly the weakest members of society. And talking about that, what are your views on the whole assisted dying campaign, the assisted dying bill?
Well, that's an interesting one, actually, because today on Trending, I was talking in the start of it about a story coming out of Canada now, where the number of, the assisted dying bill thing, obviously the MAID law that went through there a while, that's already expanded, as this one will here, into not just terminally ill, but ill and in pain, and then not just physically ill, but mentally ill, depressed, or whatever. And I interviewed a guy about three and a half years ago who had a brain tumor, but a benign brain tumor. It wasn't going to kill him. It was causing him, a bit of discomfort, but mainly like a bit of dizziness or whatever, and balance loss. Like, he wasn't going to die, but he's probably a bit older than me, and he had 2 young kids, or has 2 young kids, and he was offered assisted dying 3 times by the receptionist. Have you thought about this? And they coerce you with that, a burden to your family and all this kind of stuff. Well, the story's coming out there now that the number of these assisted dyings, these euthanasia deaths, then being harvested for organs, is like off the charts. Like, Canada is, I think it makes up nearly half the world's amount of trafficked organs from people that have gone through an assisted dying scheme. It's absolutely insane. But it's also no mistake, because I was you would have noticed that the Fabian Society was getting a little bit of traction in the last few weeks. People started to actually ask questions about what the Fabian Society is, as if it's suddenly this new thing and not something that's like from 1884. But I looked at, Sadiq Khan is a chair, and there's loads of these other people that work and they're quite open they're happy to be on the website. Whereas Kim Ledbetter, who obviously is the MP that pushed through this assisted dying bill, she's not listed as, but they don't list all the members anyway, but she's not listed as a member. But when you actually go in and look at her record in terms of her articles she's written multiple articles for the Fabian Society, multiple articles for the Young Fabians, multiple articles for Fabian Women, which is another organization, like an umbrella organization. And then she's done live conferences, live talks, presentations, all at the Fabian Society. So she might not want to have a Fabian rosette on her top, but she's well and truly affiliated with these guys. Yeah. And then you hear, how George Bernard Shaw, one of the founders of the Fabians, used to talk about, essentially useless people. And he believed that, some people on this planet, a large portion of people, actually, was his exact words, are useless and are of no use. And that so every 5 or 7 years, he gets dead specific with it, we should have to go in front of a board of a panel of people and basically explain to them why we shouldn't be dead. And then they'll determine whether we're worth keeping or whether we should be euthanized. And he's talking about that, 100 years ago. And the people that clearly align with that way of thinking, because they're part of an organization that's founded on that way of thinking, are then pushing through an assisted dying bill. And you're like, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think these things are connected.
Absolutely. And of course, we in the know that it's not it's an assisted suicide bill. And at this moment in time, that is actually illegal and unlawful in the UK. But it's, as we know, it's been going on. Back in 2021, I co-produced that film for Iconic, A Good Death, after speaking to a lot of people whose loved ones have been involuntarily euthanized, which is obviously a euphemism for murdered, in care homes and hospitals and hospices at that time. When I first heard about it, you were the first person to interview me about my findings at the time. It was on my birthday, June the 4th, 2021, you interviewed me. And it was, I think the day before that, it had suddenly occurred to me, even though I'd been working on this and investigating it for quite a long time, it suddenly occurred to me that was what happened to my mum back in 2009. She was only 68. She was in a hospice. She had breast cancer. And I went in to visit her one day and sat next to her and watched her die from the drugs they were feeding into her arm via a syringe driver for 45 hours. It took 45 hours, which is the average time is from syringe driver to death is 29 hours. So she fought for quite a long time. I had no clue what was going on, but I didn't know. I just thought she was dying from the cancer, obviously. But then afterwards, I used to tell people she was dying from, she died from chemotherapy, because she'd had that as well. But then I suddenly realized back in 2021, after talking to a lot of people, no, she was euthanized in front of my eyes, and the feeling when you realize something like that and realize how stupid you were and you didn't know what was happening at the time, it's just the most awful feeling. I've now got a group of almost 200 people. I've spoken to over 1,000 people, but in the group there's 200, and their stories are all so similar. And I mean, I went to your dad with it as well, and you know, your family were one of the first people who actually really listened and put the film out. So that's still available on Rumble, I believe, and on Iconic, A Good Death. So, and then since then, I've just looked into it more and more and more. So, you know, thanks to you and to Jamie and to David, it's you know, it's actually out there. And then we had Majid Nawaz on board, who's been brilliant and supportive. Andrew Bridgen, you know, met up with us in Parliament, and he's been supportive as well. So yeah, but it's still happening, and there's still a lot of people who don't realise what assisted dying actually involves. It's not the peaceful death that people.
It's barbaric. It's barbaric, yeah. I mean, you know, the Liverpool care pathway, you know, was supposedly abolished in, I think, 2015. It clearly wasn't, but they rebranded it anyway as COVID, you know, protocols, and it is barbaric, and it's strange, you know, because when you think, like, in my naivety, I believed as well, probably like most people, that a do not resuscitate order was basically, if you're very frail and old and dying, and you get to a point when you're in the last throes, that you're not going to have, you know, a 15-stone paramedic jump on top of the bed and try and, you know, resuscitate you, pump in your chest and stuff. Well, that's not what it means at all. And when you look at what a do not resuscitate order is, you know, that's what kills them. It's not a don't resuscitate them. It's a just kill them. Then it's extraordinary. You know, even down to giving them no water and then putting a tiny bit of like a drip on their lips, so it tricks their mind into thinking they're not thirsty when actually they're you know, they're dehydrating to death. It's mad.
I mean, there's so many things I could say about that, but there's the recent story about Adrian Poulton, the Down syndrome man, who they said in the story that he was starved to death in hospital. They mistakenly thought he was end of life. The guy was, I don't know, 40 something, early 50s, and Down syndrome, and they put him on an end of life pathway, and he was dead within a few days, and that he was starved to death. Now, when I first read that story, I thought, hang on a minute. You know, I think it's 9 days or something he died from when he went into hospital. It's like, no, you can go for like 3 or 4 weeks quite easily without starving to death, you know. So I realized then he must have died of thirst, basically, because that's, you know, a matter of that sort of time period. And to do that to someone, it's torture. It's actually prolonged torture, which also is illegal, obviously. And they've obviously put this poor guy on this end of life pathway and killed him because I don't know why, because they made a mistake apparently, but no one's being held accountable for these murders. That's the problem.
No. But also, like, that to me is insane, because if someone's on an end, so for me, if someone's on an end of life pathway, that says to me, okay, this is how it should be, that okay, someone maybe has a week or 2 weeks left to live, and if no one does anything between now and then they will die within 2-3 weeks, and they'll die in agony. So a pathway is, okay, well, what we're going to do then, we're going to give you some pain relief. Not we're going to stop giving you water and stop giving you food, because that would kill anyone, even if someone wasn't ill. If I go anywhere and say, oh, you know, that guy over there, yeah, no, put him on a pathway. There might not be anything wrong with him, but if you don't feed him and water him for a period of time, he will die. And they'll go, oh, that's sad, isn't it? He died of the pathway. No, you killed him. You starved him and dehydrated him to death. Yeah,
and obviously you don't want people to suffer in their final days. But back in 2020, DNRs were being put on people who were healthy. My dad went into a care home because he'd had a minor stroke. He needed a bit of looking after for a few weeks, few months or whatever. And then I found out in May 2020 that he had a DNR on him. So I said, well, what is that? I didn't even know at the time. Not really. And they told me, I said, oh, he doesn't need one of those. You can take that off. You know, he's not terminally ill or anything. He doesn't need that. You know, if he chokes on his boiled egg at breakfast, you know, don't leave him to choke to death. Please, you know, help him and resuscitate him. And I asked my dad about it as well. And at first he kind of said, oh, well, you know, I suppose if the doctor wants that, you know, that's right. You know, when, you know, if you're going to die, you're going to die. You know, they don't need to risk. And I went, no, Dad, look at it this way. What if they put a DNR on me and it said, you know, if anything happens to her, we're not. And he went, oh, no, I wouldn't like that. I said, well, that's why I don't like it for you. And he went, oh, actually, yeah, now you put it like that, you know. So they didn't take it off. I got him out of the care home instead, as you know, because he was getting so depressed with the lockdowns, and he felt he was like in prison. And a lot of the elderly did actually fade away and die from loneliness and depression and heartbreak. You know, absolutely.
Well, they were in prison, Jacqui, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were in prison in their room.
But how can we ever forgive that? People go, oh, you're still harping on about the care homes and the COVIDs. And it's like, yeah, I am actually, because we're actually deeply traumatized by it and lost people in the process. You know, my dad was actually killed at home in the end. They still got him, but that's another story. I think it's on your dad's website, if anyone wants to read it. But
I'm the same, Jacqui. I'm not going to shut up, mate. No one's been held accountable. No, there's been no justice served. That's like saying to Stephen Lawrence's mum, why are you still banging on about the murder of your son?
Yeah.
Well, because there wasn't justice, and so I ain't going to shut up until I get it. And you know, we're the same. Like when someone's held accountable and never again means never again, maybe I might start to move on from it. But until then, no way.
Yeah, the members of my group, they can't even grieve. And this is something that not many people are aware of, because when you're fighting for justice, when a loved one has died in such a horrendous way, you can't grieve until justice has been had, you know, because it's not settled, you know. It's an awful thing. And so the ripple effect of these murders is colossal. You know, it's not just the person who's been killed, it's their whole family, their friends, everything. Everyone is affected forevermore. You know, it never gets better. It's an awful thing. And you mentioned earlier about organ harvesting. That's something I've been looking into as well. I'd love to make a film about that. I've actually written up a treatment for it. And I've spoken to various people about it. And you've done that video on your website. Actually, I just noticed it this morning. It's horrendous, isn't it? It's a massive industry. I interviewed Dr. Heidi Klessig. Have you interviewed her?
Yeah, she's great.
She's so
really
good. I was frightened for her when I first read, because I did an article, and the title was basically, I'm guilty of murder by dismemberment. She's admitting that she was involved with the killing of a patient so they could have their organs removed back in the late 80s, I think it was. And she's written a book called The Brain Death Myth, because obviously it is a myth. And she's so brave, like speaking out about it. But the first thing I thought was, oh, you evil, horrible person, you know, I don't know if I like you very much. And then I thought, no, I need to speak to you. So I spoke to her, and she's incredibly sorry for what she's done. But she said, although she had an idea something was amiss, she didn't really know for sure. She was very young at the time. She was an anaesthetist, I think, because the doctor had said to her, can you give the patient some anesthetic? And she was like, well, why? Because they're dead. And he was like, oh, just in case. And she was like, okay. It's like, just in case what? It's like, what the hell?
Well, that's the myth of brain death, is just plain and simple. If someone's dead, you can't harvest their organs. And if someone's alive, that's murder. So you just insert brain death in the middle, and you've got yourself a multi-billion-dollar industry. Done.
Well, that was introduced back in the late 60s to facilitate organ harvesting. It's like, how can we get these organs out of a living body? Because obviously they know use out of a cadaver. So they say, oh, we need to come up with some idea. I know, let's just say they're dead. Yeah, but they're not dead. But let's just say they're brain dead. Let's give that a go. Oh, what's brain dead? Oh, we'll say that the stem to the brain has died. Or, I don't know, we'll make up something. And that's what they've done. And people have been going along with it for 50 years. And I've spoken to people who have had loved ones being told that their loved one is brain dead, and they need to, you know, that's it, it's over. But they're still breathing, their heart's still going. Oh, it doesn't matter. Don't pay any attention to that. It's absolutely the stuff of nightmares. I posted a video the other day on X, and it was an exorcism. And this I presume he's a priest, is exorcising this girl who's clearly demonically possessed by the things she's saying and the faces she's making, and I don't think she's acting. And she was saying that they're killing people, the demons are killing people via medicine, via pharmakia, she was saying, and that they needed to kill the people in hospital using medicines, and they needed to get these people before they'd repented. It was absolutely bizarre. But it kind of makes sense. And some of the expressions she's made, I've seen those very same expressions on faces of doctors and nurses and paramedics. Not all of them, obviously. Most of them are amazing, but the minority, there's these demons. And she's saying we're working through the hospitals, we're working through the medications that we're giving to people. Was she referring to it's horrendous video to watch? Watch it with caution and don't let your kids see it, for God's sake. But yeah, it kind of struck me as quite real. I mean, do you think that's possible? I know your dad talks about, other entities and evil forces. And do you think, in your opinion, could that be possible? That there's something satanic going on like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, if you look around the world and the people particularly that are making the decisions that affect us every day, you'd be hard pressed to see any humanity in any of them.
Yeah.
And in terms of the expansion of pharma, we've got to a point now where they're celebrating the fact that there's kids cancer hospitals so big in America that actually it's amazing. You can see them from space. They're so big. And you're like, in what world is that a good thing? In what world is it a good thing that we've got to a point that you have to do that?
Yeah, forget the Great Wall of China. Hey, look at our cancer hospitals.
Yeah, look, think how many kids are in there. Yeah, let's celebrate. It's extraordinary. Yeah, I think there's some real demonic stuff going on, mate. And there's certain characters that you look at within the political sphere, and I think most of the people probably that are really making the decisions, we probably could walk past in the street and we wouldn't even recognize them.
Yeah.
But then there's others, in political spheres of influence that are either, they've got compromat on them, or they're just, sociopathic narcissists that want the perceived power and the money and all that stuff. Like there's those. And then there's people like, Tony Blair, Benjamin Netanyahu, people like that. I think, oh no, you'd work for Satan for free. Like they are, I think they're actually possessed. They're demons.
Yeah, and you can see it on their face. You can see it in their eyes.
You can see it.
Anyway,
Blair and Netanyahu particularly, you can see it in their eyes.
Dark, horrible stuff. Tell us about Sunday night, the event in Birmingham. How do you reckon that went?
It was good fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it actually because I didn't know what to expect. So I was on the phone to my mate Rob actually when I was driving, and he was like, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Birmingham for this event." He goes, "Oh, what's that then?" I went, "I don't really know, to be honest." Basically, I think it's like a fireside chat type thing, and it was nice, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, it was really good. I must send you a few videos and pictures that I took actually. It was great. It was great fun and really nice to be with like-minded people. And wasn't Abby Roberts' set fantastic?
It was great. Yeah, I found it really funny. I must admit, I'd only seen her do stand-up once, and it was in Kegworth at an event, but I was sort of in and out, and so I didn't, I probably wasn't paying quite as much attention as I should. Whereas this one was, it was good. And she seemed to me like she had a weight lifted off her shoulders when she was on stage. Like,
she really did, yeah.
No, it was great. And I think everyone that spoke
I cried with laughter. But then when she was, because she's an amazing singer as well, and I love the fact that she incorporates music into her set. But when she sang that song, that kind of Jesus-y song, when she said she was in the cell after being arrested and she sang a little blast of it, it was like, oh my God, now I'm crying because I don't know what the feeling was with like emotion, rather than with laughter. But yeah, I think that's quite amazing when a comedian can actually get that sort of response from the audience, 1 minute crying because of the pathos and the sadness, and the next minute crying because you're laughing so much that the tears run down your legs, But of course, she got really bad news that evening as well, that a friend of hers had passed away, and she talked about that on Abby Daly last night. So yeah, that was horrible for her. But she was actually saying something quite interesting, which takes us back to what you were saying at the beginning, how if you're nervous about going on stage or worried about something, like as she said, does my bum look big in this, or all these little petty things, when it comes down to it, life is short and that stuff doesn't matter. And if you are able to get up and speak, if you're able to get up and sing, if you're able to shout or write a book or play a song, just do it. It doesn't matter. Just be grateful that you're able to do those things and you've got those skills. I mean, you're obviously a musician as well. And we were talking, the question I asked, I found your response very interesting too. I was saying a lot of music these days seems to have lost its soul, not just music, but art and anything creative, writing. You read books and you'll think, well, that's written by Grok, So, I mean, do you think music in particular has lost its way a bit?
I think so. I think it's just kind of, everything's just sort of become like fast food, isn't it? And music's the same, like we were saying in Birmingham, like the bands that would grow and you know, they might not make it big until their sort of 4th, 5th studio album, but they'd had time to find themselves. Like that stuff doesn't exist anymore. You know, it's smash, top 10 hit straight away, or you dropped. Like no one gets to do any of that. Like I think like Snow Patrol, a band like Snow Patrol that had Final Straw, wasn't it? Was like their big, huge breakthrough album. I think that was their 10th studio album.
Yeah.
So it took 10 albums to get to what is, you know, whether you like Snow Patrol or not, it was a huge album. Like it took 10 albums to get to this incredible, huge album. Bands don't have that anymore. Bands you know, get screwed over with by really dreadful record deals and awful publishing deals. They fall flat on their ass, and then they go back to working in Starbucks and talking about how, you know, I nearly made it once. And it's, you know, it's
heartbreaking. And you don't even be able, if you're a singer these days, you don't actually have to be able to sing, because they can tweak you, they can auto-tune you, they can you know, shape your voice to have what they want it to be. So basically a lot of these stars are being chosen for what they look like. And there's
they're models and dancers, aren't they? The you know, because you can't fake the dance bit. You know, I think you can either do that or not. So models that can dance, then it's like Milli Vanilli all over again. You just chuck a different voice on top.
It took years before they admitted to that, or before people found out. But
yeah, I know.
Yeah, they were just models. Yeah, but So have you got any musical projects coming up?
No, not at all. Actually, no, nothing. I basically just do 2 or 3 Freedom Festivals a year now for a bit of fun, but apart from that, I haven't been doing anything. But a friend of mine that I used to play in bands with for years, he's lived in London for a long time, but he's back up in Derby now. So we've kind of spoke loosely about, you know, doing something, and we're going out for a few beers together on Saturday. So no doubt after a couple of jars, we'll start to plan a whole new project or something stupid like that. But yeah, maybe. So, it'd be nice to do something.
Yeah, no, that'd be great if you do. I think you're a great songwriter, and your songs. I think I forced you to sing on one of my UNN shows, didn't I? I think you got guitar out at one point. I've got Abby coming on the show on the 27th, so I'm going to maybe get her to blast out a few tunes. But
in Russian.
There's so many other questions that I've jotted down here. You've written books. Are you going to write another book at some point? Yeah,
I reckon probably at some point. Yeah, I mean, I wrote one called "How Not to Be a Rock Star," but I'm sure
that was like 12 years ago or something.
Yeah, I know. But I'm sure I'll end up writing something one day. You know,
what do you think you're writing about?
Isn't it? I've got no idea, mate. No idea. I quite like the idea of writing children's books, actually, as weird as that is, because I've got a bit of a weird imagination. I tell sort of weird imagination stories to my kids, so yeah, that would probably be fun, and it would be something that's away from this sphere, because it can become all consuming, you know. And that's why, you know, I go for these big walks and make these walk-in videos and stuff to kind of try and have a semblance of normality, I guess.
I just watched your Wingfield Manor one. Was it Derbyshire, Mary Queen of
Scots?
Yeah,
Mary Queen of Scots. Crazy story.
So much information there in a 15-minute video. So that's on YouTube, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I love it, mate. I absolutely love it. But you know, I did it yesterday. Like I finished work.
I was going to ask you, did you go on the walk yesterday?
Yeah, I went out. I drove, but it ended up taking me an hour and 40 minutes to get all the way up to the Gwent Valley to do it. And I was just fumbling around trying to find this coal mine. It was just,
And are you on your own when you do that? You just got your camera on?
Yeah, I was yesterday. Yeah, I was. The next video, I'm going to put one out today. At 5 o'clock today. That Gemma joined me, actually. My wife joined me for the first time she's been out on a stomp, so that was nice.
I saw pictures with you. Was that last week?
But I've edited it all now, so I'll put it out today. But yeah, that was good fun. But yeah, I ended up doing this one on my own. I kind of mix and match. Some I'll do with a mate, some I'll do with on my own. Some I'll do where there's like, I've done some before where there's like 6 and 7 of us.
Yeah.
You know, they're all good fun. Like going away for a weekend to Whitby and doing like 12 videos in 3 days and stuff. I love it.
Yeah, it looks really good. What do you see? This is the last question, because I see you're looking at the clock now. You've got to go on the school.
Oh yeah, I've got to go and pick up Little.
What time is it? Because my clock on my computer is always wrong for some reason. It's 1
minute to 3, so we've got 1 minute.
Right, last question. Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? What would you be doing?
Hopefully not this.
Gareth.
hopefully not this. Like I know that some people within our realm love it, and they're like, you know, but if I'm still having to be in a position where, you know, you're traveling down to London to speak at protests, and you're trying to expose stuff and uncover stuff and stop mandates going through, and you know, That's not my dream. You know, what I'd love is for it to just bring this whole house of cards down. Still have an alternative media, because a media is supposed to hold the government and whatever the new system is, hold them to account. So they need to be there. And I would like to just sail off into the darkness, into the sunset, and like buy an old railway station, an old disused, rundown railway station, and renovate it and sit in the sun and watch my kids grow up. That'll do me.
Sit on the platform watching the world go by.
Watching my kids running around having a laugh, even though they won't really be kids in 10 years. Jeez, that's scary.
That's true, yeah.
But yeah, that's my dream, mate.
Oh, it probably is most people's dream, to be honest. Hopefully we'll get there one day. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on.
No, it's great fun, Jacqui, and I'll talk to you again soon, mate.
Yeah, soon. Thanks, Gareth. Bye.
Take care, mate. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. I'm not going just yet. I'm just going to say goodbye to everyone. So yeah, that's all from Beyond the Mainstream on Precedented TV, which you can find on YouTube. Actually, just go to the channel Unprecedented TV, and you can see all the shows there. Next week we've got the amazing John O'Looney coming on to talk about a whole load of sinister stuff, and yeah, and that's it. So that's it from me. I'm all on my own now, so I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.